you a highlight?
I did, yes. I think we have to workshop that.
Okay, folks, if you take your seats now, we're about to begin. Thanks everyone for being here. We start by acknowledging that we're on the unceded land of the Kaneha, and we also acknowledge that this land was originally used by First Nations as a gathering place. Lastly, we'd like to call out the city seal in front of you, which has its motto Concordia Salus, or salvation through harmony. So we're looking for harmony today. We're definitely hoping that you're inspired by all of these symbols to work toward the solutions we need to get to consensus. I can. So we have a new Note Well slide, this IETF. This is the current version of it. If you haven't had a chance to review it, it incorporates pieces from the two previous Note Wells, Note Well and Note Very Well, and it simply says that you agree to abide by the working methods of the IETF and to respect each other and treat each other professionally. If you have any questions about this, please approach an area director. It says a working group chair, but there's an area director right in here. He outranks us, so you can always approach him. Eric. Here are the meeting tips. I think these have not actually changed since the last time. If you're here in person, please sign into MeetEcho either on the light version, or if you are doing it on the heavyweight version, please do so in a way that keeps your sound off so we don't get echoes. If you're a remote participant, please make sure your audio and video are off unless you are presenting. So I'd like to thank Michael once again for agreeing to be our note taker. If you are capable of helping him, he is going to be taking notes in the tool, and the note-taking tool that's part of MeetEcho. Please especially go in there, and if you have said something in mic, check to make sure that if it's an action item or an outcome that you believe that's correct. We don't need to have a full transcript because we will get a full transcript from the tool, and this is all being videotaped, so there's no need to go into more detail than that. Any questions about that? I'm being told I need to eat the mic. Okay, so the next item is document status, and I'm going to turn that over to Murray.
Very briefly, we have two documents. They are 7120 bis, which is in working group last call, I believe, and 8126 bis, which is a working group document, but that's the primary focus of today's discussions. And we're hoping we can start working group last call on that one after this meeting. Of course, we'll do that on the list, but we may take a hum in the room to see if we're ready. We have a long period of issue discussion that Amanda will be leading. That most of the agenda is her. Well, I think almost all the agenda is hers, and then some AOB at the end. Is there any agenda bashing to be done? Seeing and hearing none. Let's go forward.
Okay, while she comes up, I'm just going to go and hint what the set of issues are, and then we'll go into her slides. But as you can see, there's a group of issues. If you're looking either in the agenda or the chair slides, you can see how it's being organized. And now I need to change slides just a moment. So there was a last minute adjustment to these slides. If you picked up the slides before, let's call it 2:15, please refresh to have the most recent copy. I'm going to hand you this and see if it works. We're going to have a slight test here to see whether she can change it or she needs to tell us to change.
Where is it?
Do you want to see if you can move forward? Did that not work or not?
Move forward?
No.
I can't move forward. It's the slide. Oh, I was trying.
Can you remind me how to do that, Michael?
You would go to the list of participants,
Okay.
and then you can go to the top right slash bigger ball. She's shadowed right there.
Thank you, Michael. Can you try that? All right. You're in control.
Oh, good, more control. Okay, so I think most of the action should be up front. We haven't really made major changes since the last meeting. We've mostly just, I would say, incorporated notes and proposals into the existing text. There are a few points we want to describe to make sure there aren't any issues, and we still have a few pending questions. I think the really unsettled business is mostly around specification required. So at the top of section 4, we've posted a set of questions that are all related to the aspects of the specification required procedure. And these questions have changed a bit since the last meeting. First, we need to note that an IETF stream internet draft can always get an RFC 7120 early allocation from a specification required registry if the chairs, AD, and expert agree. The question is whether they qualify for permanent registration. We understand the consensus is that the default answer is no, unless the working group that created the registry says that they work for that registry. Or if the group no longer exists, an AD can step in. So if that's not correct, please let us know. Also, 2 procedural questions. Maybe this is obvious to everyone else here, but if the working group didn't record a preference when they produced the RFC, do they have to write a new one, or can the expert simply ask them and get consensus? And that would that be consensus for the one request or for the registry in general? And then if the working group is closed, we understand the AD would announce a decision to allow IDs for the registry in general, or for one ID, or for one request, we don't know. So that's the one set of questions. I don't know if it makes sense to talk about that now.
If you have comments on this, the mic line is available for you now.
Do we feel like we need to provide standard text around this? Like, would you prefer to have, if a working group wants to allow an ID for this purpose, is there a minimum set of text that it should say to make it clear? Or if we leave it to their discretion, they might word it in a, I'm just trying to be defensive here. What do you think?
I mean, I think authors would probably prefer to be able to just grab something. I mean, if they have variations, I don't know that we'd necessarily want to say up front, no variations, but.
Right. Okay.
Just to make sure I understand this, this is basically the working group saying that when they create the registry, internet drafts are allowed. Okay. Do we know, some questions that maybe later on this are, do we know what the actual reference will be? Is it to the draft at publication or the draft family?
We need to we need to specify that in the document, because our practice is to point to the specific version of the draft that was in place when the request, or when we made the registration.
Okay.
We can update that if we're asked to, especially if something has changed. But yeah, that's missing right now, I think.
What did you mean by family? Like all versions of one draft?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because early assignments apply to the entire family and to the RFC when it's published, whereas an internet draft doesn't have that permanence. And in fact, we could say the ID series is closed at that point in time, or we could say that it can be updated 2 or 3 or 5 years later, you know, because internet drafts never die now, apparently. Okay. So I'm a little bit concerned about how the treatment of internet drafts related to the internet draft system, not the text of what's in the internet draft, and which is what I've been saying earlier.
Do you mind if I ask you a clarifying question? It would be my understanding that you would expect to note and the draft that was presented in order to get the registration, and that you would expect that to be maintained for all subsequent drafts. But when you say draft family, you know, draft without a version number, there clearly might be drafts earlier than the one presented which might have no text at all about the registration or different text than what was used to justify it. So I'm a little bit unsure about whether family is from version and then later, or all versions.
Okay. 9 times out of 10, when somebody looks for an internet draft, they're going to be looking at the last one. It's just the way the system is set up. Okay. So even though the reference was for -15, if there's a -25 and the meaning of the code point has changed in that draft, chances are somebody going to the registry is not going to necessarily pay attention to -15. They're just going to go to the internet. They're going to look it up. This is my problem that I've had, not because of internet drafts as a permanence issue, but because internet drafts are designed to have a beginning and an end, maybe never an end unless it goes to the RFC.
So Amanda said that their current practice is to note the one that was presented at registration time. So it would be listed as draft working group name, draft IETF working group name, subject name dash number.
Right.
Yeah.
And anybody who went earlier than that would clearly be doing themselves a disservice. And it would be up to the working group.
And anyone who went later than themselves might or may not be doing someone's service.
Well, I think that's a good point. And maybe what we need to do here is to make sure that we capture in the document that if the meaning changes, the registry should be updated with the document associated with the new meaning, even though the code point may not have changed name.
Let me hit this in a slightly different manner. It's hard enough getting people to understand the difference between informational RFCs and standards RFCs. Getting them to understand the difference between a -15 and a -20 when they're just getting this reference and they go looking it up. They basically type as much in, and Google expands it, and they click on and they do that search term, and they get the last draft in the series, which again might have changed the values. So this is why I'm a little bit concerned about that particular system.
So if they follow the link in the registry, it will take them directly to that version, and there's some text at the top in the data tracker that says this isn't outdated. Do you think that's problematic, or do you think people are more likely to Google it?
I think so you put a reference -15, I click on it, I go to the -15, it's out of date. I start looking for, I click on 20, and if if the meaning of the code point has changed between 15 and 20, that's a problem. And so either closing the series if you issue something, or having some other model to make sure that code point doesn't change. We expect a code point to change on an early assignment. We don't, people are smart enough to know that it's going to happen. But with internet drafts as a general process, it's the system that causes the problem, not the document that's submitted. Okay. So that's where I'm going. That's why I was going with that whole text about, I have no problems with using the internet draft format and throwing at the IANA and having IANA put its reference to a solid thing in their system. And ideally not calling it an internet draft at that point.
I think you're moving into the second question
Okay.
for document permanence. So I'm going to ask the rest of the folks in the queue to have a say, and we'll return to that.
Okay. Sorry. I was actually still on this one for a second. I got off on there. Okay. So I want to make sure has to be an IETF working group, not an IRTF research group. Because IRTF research groups are creating registries. Yes, no?
Yeah, IRTF research groups can create registries, and ISE documents can create sub-registries of registrations they've made.
Okay. So clarifying who can do clarifying which registries are permitting this internet draft thing would be useful. And it has to be an adopted document for a working group to be there, or it's just somebody coming along later on and the expert is saying yes.
I think the way this is written at the moment, it's the working group who presents it. So if they presented an unadopted draft, it would be quite odd.
But possible.
Right now, all you need is an internet draft for some of the TLS registries, and they don't have to be they don't have to be adopted TLS documents.
Right.
So again, clarifying all that in this would be useful.
Okay.
And sorry for taking
Terry.
up too much time.
This is Barry Lieba, and I'm actually going to follow up on a bit on what Mike was just doing, because we have traditionally allowed any document posted anywhere to be a specification. If I post something on my website and submit that as a specification, it's generally accepted, and I can change it at any time. So given that, why are we making people jump through hoops on internet drafts, which can also change at any time? So at one level, I think we shouldn't have different rules, and at the other level, I kind of agree with Mike that anything can be a moving target, especially when we're talking about documents other than RFCs, and not allowing documents other than RFCs would be crippling. So
Paul?
I think this is a very important topic. I just hit it yesterday in a hallway conversation where a working group is about to ask for an early registration for a document that has finished working group last call but has not gone to their AD yet. So your question here of the working group asking, does the working group chairs asking, is that sufficient, or does it have to come through their AD? I'm not proposing any answers here. I'm saying it is definitely tricky, because in the specific case I heard from yesterday, I fully expect the ISG to change the values after it's gone through IETF last call. I think there's greater than a 50% chance. So going exactly, as rarely as I agree with Mike on this, but draft -15, which is linked correctly there, someone would say, oh, look, this name dash number, and it's gone out of their head, and they're looking at the draft already in this other window, which they got off the data tracker, which is -20. It's a real issue. I think it needs to be dealt with, and I don't have a concrete solution here, but it's hitting us today.
You said Paul, you said the ISG will change the numbers?
No, the numbers are saying this document defines this.
Yep.
It's a crypto protocol. They will
Oh, there'll be new
they will change something in the document that will affect interoperability of somebody looking at the
Got it.
IANA
Thanks.
registry.
That's early registration though, right?
Ted Hart.
Okay.
Ted Hardy, two things, both from the floor. First, I think the baseline here is that IDs don't work for permanent specifications. I think we're all agreed on that. And I strongly, as an individual, support that. And then I think the second part of that is for the ones where their permanent registration is being explicitly permitted by the working group's registration policy, or we're talking about a provisional registration that we understand is temporary, then I think the way we get around the problem that Mike suggests is to say that for the cases where a working group is presenting a document, any later version which changes the meaning must update the registry. And that means that this goes from -15 to -20 if it changes at -20. And it becomes a mandate on the working group to make sure that their registration remains fresh. And that fits within the IETF method of working, because it's something that the ADs and working group chairs can track. And it means that somebody who wants to make sure that they know how a registration links to a document has to do a refresh. They can't use a cached information on that. But I think that that's an acceptable trade-off as an individual. And I suggest that what we do here is we continue to go with this basic idea, but add a requirement to working groups which do permit this to also permit a refreshed update if the meaning changes. And that's required if it's an IETF working group. And if it's something like TLS where they are permitting working drafts which are not from the working group, that in that instance, they must also permit updates to the registration with later versions where the meaning has changed. And I think that gets us with what we want, which is a link between the registration and the current meaning in all cases, without requiring immutability of either, which doesn't make sense for this particular category. Again, as an individual. Thank you.
How do you enforce that with the individual submitting the document to the registry?
For the people not in the room, a question was raised, how do you enforce that? That's up to the ADs and working group chairs to enforce. And I think that the community will have to sign up to it when we post this document for community review in IETF last call. But I think it's sensible enough that the working group chairs in training and other things can be told, hey, if you're allowing this kind of registration, you got to keep track of it. Again, as an individual.
That didn't work. I just want to note that there's sort of an enforcement mechanism if you don't, if you just use early allocation as a working group adopted document. Because we send out renewal requests every year, a couple months before things are about to expire, and at that point, it could be a question. This leaves independent stream documents out in the cold. If they had to be, if it had to be a working group adopted document, then we could just use early allocation. But the procedure would really only make sense for documents that haven't been adopted.
Okay, now I have 2 points to make. As the independent submissions editor, it's okay for them to be out in the cold until the document gets sent over to the RPC, and then the IANA can do the allocation. They can play with whatever they're going to play with when they're testing. They just have to follow along with the dotted, the bouncing ball in terms of the IANA rules. There's no problem there, as far as I'm concerned. They can take a little inconvenience on that point. However, the main point I came up to speak about is that I believe we are once again the tail wagging the dog here, and the tail in this case is crypto policy. Most of this discussion, the hidden issue really here is that the crypto people don't really want to have RFCs for a lot of the documents. I get that, okay, but I'm not sure that we should tweak the entire purpose of the internet draft system, which is to create drafts, right? And the purpose of a draft is to be a working document to change in order to satisfy this need for people to not want to have RFCs. So when somebody asks the question, right, it seems, or makes the assertion, it seems unfortunate that we would have one set of rules for the drafts, which are seemingly archival, and another set of rules for somebody putting something on their own website. Well, what they do on their own website is their business. What we do on our system is our business. And the thing we need to make sure is that we don't subvert the purpose of the draft system, which is to allow them to be changeable. That leads to all the complications that Mike raised in terms of when do you know that a draft is done, which is your second point, right? When do you know, how do you know that you're not handling a bunch of, when do you need, how do you know that the code point has been properly updated when the functionality is changed, and how do you manage interoperability, which is a hiding nightmare here a little bit, I think, in terms of having multiple code points throughout for non for things we're working on in draft form. The ultimate comment that I have to address the first point is sort of twofold, which mostly I think aligns with what Ted said. First is we need to really document the hazards of using internet drafts for non-early code point assignment, like all of the crypto policy. There are some real hazards hiding there, like, people will forget to update the registry. This is going to happen because it has happened. Okay, so that's number one. And rather than just go through that whole list, I would just say, let's open up a section in the doc and say, here's the hazards of using internet drafts, right? Up to and including, we want to be careful not to think of these things as archival. They may be archived in some fashion, but they're not meant for, it says right on the front of an internet draft, not meant for, permanent, for stable to be used as a stable reference. So we should certainly be document that here, right? And working groups should be discouraged, in my opinion, from using internet drafts for other than early assignment for those reasons.
We'll point out that the discussion of how the draft system used is out of scope for this working group. It's useful only in the context of how it affects registration policy. The rest of how they use drafts are out of scope for this work.
Yes, but they're intertwined, Ted. So it's very difficult to separate these 2 points. Right?
Do your best.
My point is, if we're going to talk about internet drafts in 8126, or if we're going to say anything, you've opened the can of worms. You did.
Oh, you're up.
Okay. So I've raised this point in maybe not in this forum, but in certainly in Media Man, and I think I've spoken about this with Amanda as well. The thing I feel that is lacking is that you do not keep a history of registrations in a registry. And without a history of registrations, you'll keep having these problems, because if you had a history, you can say, okay, till that point it is related to draft 15, then it's related to a certain RFC, and a few years later it's related to another RFC. But today there is just no way to get that information.
Rich?
Rich Sauls, I'm one of the TLS registry experts. We opened up to support drafts because it increases interoperability. Otherwise, what would happen is the TLS working group would become a choke point for all of the uses for TLS across everything, and there's no way we wanted that. We don't care how COAP uses TLS. And so I think we have the right trade-off now in that the registry entry, the sub-registry, says what the draft version number is, and that's it. And if the number you get is different, people will they'll say, oh, I got 21 and this says 17. I assume it's going to work. We can't control for stupidity, and we shouldn't spend too much effort doing it.
This is Barry Lieba. Following up on both what Elliot and Rich said, and I wouldn't call it stupidity, but there's, okay, there are some registries, the real focus is getting an accurate specification. Some registries, it's more, we'd rather have registration than not. And maybe what we need here is some guidance for the experts and the working group to steer them on that, to say, you've got to consider the purpose of your registry and the relative importance of an absolutely rock-stable document versus getting a registration in, even if the specification turns out to be a moving target. In a lot of the apps protocols, it's more important just to get the registration in than it is to have a rock stable specification.
May I
So
ask you to produce
having some
text?
guidance about that would be
May
useful.
I ask you if you're volunteering to produce text?
I will. Unfortunately, I volunteered to produce text after Madrid also and didn't. So I would appreciate if I got a ping with what I've committed to, so I'm
Okay,
reminded.
so if our minute taker could document that we have a commitment from Barry and assign an action item to the working group chairs to
Parfait.
hold a whip in a chair at the appropriate distance, that would be appreciated. Thank you. Okay, I think we have closed off on this topic. We're expecting new text from Barry, and there may be continued discussion on the list. But the next question, obviously related, as Mike St. John's earlier comment showed, is how does IANA guarantee document permanence?
Yes, sorry, this is falling off the slide. It's been suggested that we require the use of archiving services, but those really can't be guaranteed to be permanent either. We can certainly store documents, but if we can't get permission to republish, it's not clear how useful this is. Our thinking right now is maybe we treat this as an internal IANA issue, try to solve it outside the document, because it seems unlikely that we'll have this solved in time. The question is whether we discuss the issue in the document, which actually might need to be outside the specification required section, because first come, first serve and expert review registrations can also point to documents. Perhaps we could also say that you could always give, and this is what's falling off, you could always give IANA permission to republish a stored copy of the spec. And
Paul?
I propose that there is a separate later document on this topic. It would go into too many places in the current document. If we only put it once and refer to it, it'll be weird. And I believe that that separate document needs to have a much wider IETF consensus than this one, however much we're getting for this one. Every time this has come up in the security area, it is completely blown up, and dozens of people have extremely strong opinions about it and such like that. There's no reason to have that in this document.
Do you think answering that, excuse me, do you think answering that question fits within our charter? Because
I haven't looked at our charter. We might need to recharter
Right.
or whatever. I assure you, if you take it to the security area, they will hit you. Like they've tried this too often and such like that. If it's not in our charter, then I would suggest rechartering would be appropriate for it. But I really do feel this is a big separate topic.
The reason I mention that is because Roman, who's delayed getting here, but would probably remind us that we've talked about our IDs valid for use in registrations, et cetera.
Yeah.
And that decision he says is outside of our charter. If we want to tackle that, it will be a new initiative outside.
Yeah.
It sounds like what you're talking about here might marry well into that work.
Absolutely, absolutely, because it is also the question of RFCs that have been obsoleted. So, I mean, the draft one makes it clearer, but RFCs being obsoleted has the same issue. So I would say good topic, not for this document.
Does that mean this document should avoid the question altogether? Or
I believe so.
Is her proposal an acceptable alternative?
Well, the proposal to don't address is the acceptable alternative.
Well, I'm sorry, I'm focused on the IANA will pursue this internally. I guess we don't need to say that. You're right. Okay.
Right, yeah.
So I just want to differentiate between the IANA guaranteeing a document permanence and the IANA having guidance on what is acceptable as a stable reference, right? Those are two different things, right?
I mean, I think the issue is just that no reference is a stable reference.
Well,
Yeah.
you could say, so if we require a stable reference, right, then you have to understand what that means. But otherwise, I generally agree with the others. This is not, I agree with Paul. The IANA can't guarantee document permanence unless you really do create a whole other effort to keep a copy of a document
Right.
and to share it.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, in many cases, there are registries that would otherwise be first come, first served, but people would just like a little bit of an informative reference that addresses, question X, and therefore it has to be specification required so an expert can identify it. But they're not looking for something heavyweight. They're looking for just something on a website. And in those cases, it might be inappropriate to say you have to have, you have to meet certain parameters.
Yeah. So on the whole, if the impact, I guess we should be thinking about who is impacted if the reference is lost, right? And usually, and I don't think there's an easy answer to that question either, as it happens, right? Because sometimes the people who do the request are not the ones who are going to be impacted later. So I don't have great answers here, but I do think that Paul's right that in terms of guaranteeing permanence, that's not the IANA's job, from my perspective.
Hi, just a quick note. We keep thinking of stable references being internet references. A reference to a book or a catalog or a document number is sufficient. It doesn't have to be something that's reachable. It just has to be something that somebody might be able to get a hold of if they spend the time and money to do so. And I think that's sort of the status. With respect to the permanent stuff, like I said, we can either accept what people are putting on things or say, mail us a copy and we'll keep it in our files. We won't publish it or something along those lines. It could be as simple as that. So.
The queue has drained. I think that the last set of discussions highlight that it might be better to treat this outside of the current document because the amount of discussion that it needs to have is likely to be extensive and to cover areas that are potentially unrelated to the specifics of the IANA situation. So I think for the notes, we're going to record that the current theory is that this will become a separate effort and we'll work with Roman to determine the home of where that effort will be and the timing of that effort. Is there anybody who objects to that way forward? It will be confirmed on the list, obviously. But. Okay, it sounds like that has been identified as the tentative way forward pending confirmation on the list. Thanks.
So we brought up a couple of issues that might mean that someone would have to decide whether an organization qualifies as a standards organization, which would mean declaring some kind of criteria. RFC 6838 currently has the IASG make this determination for standards tree media type requests. It doesn't provide criteria, and we understand this can be problematic. And this is a broad space that doesn't just include internet-specific organizations. We've got meteorology, motion picture camera, genealogy organizations that have applied. People might not be familiar with these, and they might be somewhat underdocumented online. So we prefer not to write these criteria. But we do want to make a kind of early allocation available to SDOs that need numbers before they can publish. So we're looking at something like the text in RFC 8392 that says to allow for the allocation of values prior to publication, the designated experts may approve registration once they are satisfied that a specification would be published. So if we say that you have to be an SDO to do this, either we need identifying criteria, or we say that it's only available to SDOs that have a certain type of relationship with the IETF or some other single qualification that doesn't involve, evaluating the characteristics of the thing. It couldn't just be a liaison with the IETF that wouldn't catch the right organizations, OpenID, for instance. So we're wondering if we can just describe the standards organization scenario here without stating that you must be a standards organization to receive such an early allocation. We're wondering if we're placing too much of a burden on experts if we say, the expert has to be satisfied, the document will be published without also saying you have to be an SDO to ask. We might have to go a little more into what satisfied means. However, we don't think that people asking for code points before they have a spec has been a real problem, except where standards organizations and NIDs are concerned. Let's see. We also, the next slide is about process, but maybe somebody would, yeah.
This strikes me as causing the same problem for the experts as it did for the IASG. And I feel like the IASG is in a better position to come up with their own criteria than the experts would be, to come up with, well, what counts as, I think strongly that this is probably going to be documented at some point. I mean, having the criteria still allow, if the IASG says they're an SDO, they can do it. And then let the IASG figure out what criteria they want to use. And they can moan about it, but that's why we pay them so much money. As for experts, I would rather have a little easier bar for them to cross. Being one, I'm not too worried for the one that I deal with, but maybe others might have an opinion.
My concern about not having written down criteria for what an SDO is, what qualifies, is that from one ISG to the next, the criteria can shift if you don't have something written. And so you have, no, I didn't let you become one, I'm not on the ISG anymore, or he lets you in, that's not fair, I'm going to appeal something, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I also understand why we don't want to do that. You know, so I'm torn what the right answer is.
And just a quick follow-up. I don't think it's a bad idea to write down those criteria. I just think it's a bad idea for us or IANA to write down those criteria. The ISG can decide, well, we're going to take the chance and it's going to change from IASG to IASG, or the ISG can decide we'll write down those criteria. Their choice.
The other risk with having something written down is it gives you a bar to try to hit, or finagle your way to. I get it.
I think we're overcomplicating this thing slightly because, again, the key thing here is a referenceable document. So I said, when I was writing my text and provided, I mentioned SDOs as a class of thing, mainly because we were dealing with them already. But in many cases, they're no different than a guy writing, asking for a code point for, you know, fumble protocol or something like that. With respect to an SDIO and early assignment, which is what we're talking about here, one of the simplest ways might be, one, IANA owns the copyright for the database. Giving them the number and marking it as reserved in the database until they complete their publication and hand us back to that should satisfy the whole set of things. So you do the reservation, you share the reservation between us and them. They can't use it in their documents until they once they publish it, they tell us, and we basically add it to our database. So anyway, random thought for fixing problems. Rather than causing
Ted Hardy, as an individual, I think that the document text that Barry so kindly agreed to write for us will actually read on this, because I kind of suspect that the answer for what qualifies for this is going to vary greatly depending on what kind of registry we're talking about. For URI provisional registry, for example, we are interested in collision primarily. It's a collision avoidance registry more than anything else, because it's not bounded in any way. There are any number of strings that we can put colons after. And people may prefer ones or another, but we're really concerned that the internet doesn't think two different things, MMS colon, and that's a risk we've faced. So the rules for what counts here are going to vary by what type of registry and how limited the registry is. And I think that the experts are very, very cognizant of that, and that the experts and the IASG together can make these decisions on when waivers occur without having to write down generic rules that are going to have to change depending on what the registry type is. And there's a broad spectrum. There are some buckets. We got 6 of these types to work with, and getting one is going to require convincing everybody in their stepkids, or it's a free text, but we're avoiding collision. So I think leaving it to a combination of the experts and the IASG to confirm is sensible in this instance. That's my opinion as an individual.
This is Barry Leva. Yeah, what Ted said, and also going with Mike saying we're overcomplicating things. Yeah, the media types registry has had a thing for the IASG to approve in the standards tree any organization that they think is appropriate to allow them to register in the standards tree. They do a one-time approval. This has been going on for years and has worked. Nobody has fought about it. Nobody has had an argument. Let's not overcomplicate it.
So Eric Ving, member of the IAG, but speaking here as an individual, only reporting my experience that many of us share. That's exactly what we do, right? Sometimes we approve one SDO as an SDO and we go forward. Common sense, right?
Barry again. I'll just add that the wording we put in what the IASG approves for standards tree registrations and media types is not that it's an SDO, that we say it's an external organization that has been approved to register in the standards tree. So we don't call them SDOs, we don't say they're special things, we just say they've gotten the stamp of approval and there it is.
John?
For whatever it's worth, I think I may be the guilty party for having first introduced this SDO language. And Barry is right on 2 counts. One of them is that is exactly what he said about this being an interaction between the experts and the ISG. And the second is that the current media type language, which avoids the SDO language entirely, is probably the right way to go about this or whatever. And somebody being an STO for one particular registry or set of registries or context may not make them a good STO for other things, and vice versa. I don't think there's a significant threat model there in terms of applications, but try to adopt a sweeping policy which gives somebody an official IETF recognized STO model, which thereafter makes them special, would not be a good idea.
I want to say that our list of ISG recognized organizations uses standards organization in the title of the registry, but I have no Wi-Fi at this time. But I believe if it's not in 6838. Let's see. So we can move forward. And next slide, I don't know if it's relevant. We would probably need to record something that specifies how long these things stay in the registry if nothing happens. We're proposing a 1-year expiration date that this 7120 procedure just has. If they expire, they remain in place with the expiration date, but the chairs, or in this case, the experts, can tell us to do something else, deprecate or remove. The question is, can they come back later and request the number that they've seeded which we've seen with expired internet drafts. I don't know. We get into, I guess, usual checking issues. Who checks for publication? We can leave this with the expert, but that's maybe we have better, tracking tools than the expert does. But I think we need input from designated experts on this, and we also. This seems like an awkward process to actually name. I don't know if we just tuck it in there in the specification required, subsection.
I think it's reasonable for the IANA to require notification of publication of the specification. Well, that sounded rather alliterative. And so long as you have that, and and the other thing you can require, of course, and you already do this, is an email address for contact. And what I would suggest is that the IANA should probably warn the organization, maybe some 30 days out or something like that, that this is about to expire.
Yeah.
And the rest is on them.
Sounds good. Move on, or
I don't see anybody yet. Oh, Elliot, you're the last in the queue. Can you lower your hand? Yeah, I think we're done with that. So.
okay. So I think we can write the process part, but I'm not sure how to approach the actual description of the who can have it and what's required, whether it's the expert with the ISG, or if the ISG is determining who's eligible.
So I think what I heard was the expert works with the ISG if it's not an organization that has been previously approved for allocation.
Okay.
Yeah, this is Barry. The model in 6838 is
Okay.
is exactly that there's a one-time IASG approval if they haven't been approved already. And I just checked, 6838 does say standards-related organization, but the text we use in the IASG approval does not say anything about that. So.
Okay. So it seems like we might need to maintain a registry for that, like we do for media types. Okay, so that's an IANA action. Okay. In that case,
You might be able to take the registry that you have for media types
Yeah.
and just generalize it to this, because why bother repeating any that you get?
Right, but keeping in mind what John Clenson said, that you'll need one for each registry that does this. So it's kind of a side registry for each.
Okay, so we could rename a group of registries and then just add this to a group. Okay. What the heck is next? Yes, the first one should be quick. A126 kind of strongly recommends including guidance for experts if you're using an expert review procedure, and we would like to say it's a must. And we would recommend putting it in its own subsection. Okay. The next bit is very procedural. Expert review mailing lists. We're just pointing out, you have to name the list. You have to set a deadline for experts because we are not going to know that the request exists unless you have the applicants write to us and we forward it to the list with the applicant in copy. So I don't know if this is something people might want to even require or recommend. We'll just have, I don't know that we could, tell all 19 existing mailing lists, hey, everybody needs to write to us now. But That was off the top of my head. It is several. But there are also lists that cover multiple registries, and registries get added to
I was
to that
surprised by
list
how small
coverage.
that number was.
No, well, like something like the JOT list covers a bunch. And there's a lot of inactive ones, I'd say. So requests do get dropped occasionally, and applicants don't necessarily know that we aren't watching. So it may be a while before they write to us and say, hey, what happened to this? Because maybe an expert just didn't update their email address, or it's going to the wrong folder or something like that. So, I mean, it's something we strongly recommend, but I don't know if anyone cares about this. I don't know what the counter argument is. From a sending us a ticket perspective, it's certainly helpful because you'll already have the ticket number in the subject line, so you won't be getting a bunch of auto replies when you write to us. But
Yeah, I don't understand what the counter argument is either, but I would expect that the general flow should be that when you want a code point, you make the request through IANA. IANA then forwards it to the expert list. Now, I understand that people can consult with the expert list, but that should never be taken as a request of IANA. And maybe that's the way you put it.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think this is contradicting any language. Usually requests say that if IANA receives it, we need to direct the request to the list, but that could mean send the person, send the mail.
That I think is an internal IANA process.
Okay, great. And uh-oh, Kim.
I guess a question for the room. I struggle a little bit sometimes thinking about this question generally about what are mailing lists actually there? What problems are the mailing list trying to solve? And is this a method of working we should be seeking to sustain long term? Because it operationally presents us with a lot of different challenges that I think this is trying to touch upon, but it really puts a lot of the process completely beyond IANA's grasp. And I'm not saying we should outmode it, but there aren't that many mailing lists. And I'm just wondering, is that the right approach we should be pursuing long term, or should we be over time trying to phase out the use of mailing lists and maybe superseding them with other procedural things that perhaps are more tightly monitored, like more integrated, for example, with the data tracker or with IANA's toolings and so forth. So I guess that's just more of a question. Thanks.
Yeah, please, Rich, please get rid of the mailing lists. They cause confusion. In TLS, we had for a long time, it says, oh, send mail to TLS Reg Review to get thing. And so we went through a couple of registrations where it actually caused issues because nobody noticed until very late in the process that IANA, IANA was never consulted about this. So yeah, I'm strongly support what Kim said. Let's just phase out the mailing lists, and they can put individual names on the tickets. We do it all the time.
Separately, as an individual, I point out that there are two kinds of mailing lists here. One of which is a mailing list of experts that makes a decision. And I agree with Rich that in that instance, it leaves it diffuse who is responsible for making the decision. And in those cases, it's problematic. But there are other kinds of mailing lists, which are review lists where people give feedback to proponents of particular things. And in those, I think we need to retain them because it's very, very commonly the case that no single individual on that list has enough experience to answer all of the questions that might come up from a proponent for a registration. So I think do whatever you think is appropriate. Please just don't say JIRA. For assigning things to the actual experts when the experts are on the hook to make a decision. But for the lists which are for broader review, I think we need to retain those and to continue, in many of these cases, leaving them open lists so that the output of the lists can be read in the archives and people can join and leave them as appropriate. Thank you.
Now, Elliot.
Okay, so the two that Ted's got a good point. The two that I have in mind, right, are there's the URI review list is a good one, and then there's and then the other one I look at is the port reviewer list that Joe runs, so there's the need for accountability on a request. Accountability should generally fall to an individual in terms of at least shepherding requests. Right, so it's an individual. If the policy is to copy the list on the request, that's fine, and it's important for a number of the different code points because you bring in new designated experts. They need to understand actually how to do a review, and Joe is really good at this. By the way, he gives he's been doing it so long that when he can literally just say, well, here's the evaluation criteria that I'm using, right, to go through this request. That transparency to the other designated experts is really important. And also, he can correct or question designated experts when it looks like they're about to make a decision that is at the very least questionable. So I think those lists are good in that context, right? The URI review is an interesting one too, because I'm not actually sure what the decision process is for that one, right? And my thinking is that at the very least you have to have a designated shepherd or something to move on. Can you talk to that, Ted?
Actually, I just confirmed that the backup URI expert is sitting next to me, but the upshot is that it's up to the person who's the designated expert for the registry to do the final approval, and that part of that is they have to make sure that it has been discussed on the list and that any issues raised by the list have been addressed. So there's still somebody on the hook, right? And it's Mark or Murray, depending on who's at the front that particular day. But there's still a person who must make the call. It's not the list that makes the call. They do the review.
Okay, so that's the model that I think we should use. And I think, Tim, like those lists have real value. Like, don't get rid of them because like learning is an important part of this exercise.
All right, sorry. I just have one observation on.
I'm sorry, who are you?
Because you didn't enter the queue, you need to state your name at the microphone so that it's
Okay.
captured in the
All
transcript.
right. So my name is Kunle Olorundare. I'm from Nigeria. All right, thank you very much. All right, so my comment has to do with the naming of the list, so to say. I just want to get a clarification on if there are set procedures on how those documents should be named. What I mean by that is, if I'm going to name a particular document as an expert, or I should know that probably maybe there is a sequence I need to follow so that anybody that is familiar with that sequence will understand the name of that particular document. Thank you very much.
Elliot said something about learning, and I can't stress enough the value of a list and its archive for someone who's coming into the role of being a reviewer. When I joined the media type reviewer team, Ned was the guy I wanted to learn from, and a lot of his historical knowledge of media types and what we review and what we look for and what are problems was exchanged between me and him privately. I can't imagine the value of it would have had to have an archive for me to go and read and not bother him because his availability was sometimes scarce. So in addition to the live review and all of that, there's the historical stuff that I think you might be able to go back and figure out why did this get approved or not approved. But you can also train new reviewers. I think that's extremely valuable.
Okay,
Are
so
there
it's
any more comments on this topic? Okay, moving on then.
okay. Um, uh, So we've added two big chunks to the registration procedure section. One is sort of a new procedure, the addition of augmentation with expert review to IETF stream procedures. And Karsten and Marco documented this, and I think we need to know whether there's anything else we need to capture here. We've got a list of specific registry procedure names, and we've described how these reviews get triggered, and it's IANA carrying them out. And we've really just listed the one reason someone might want to use an expert augmented procedure. I don't know if that's sufficient. So that we need input on.
So I'll mention something that is sort of related to this and sort of opens a little bit of a can of worms, but I'm going to channel Jeff Haas for a moment, which is a little background. The IDR people are concerned that that they really do want their capability code points documented, but they want it to be lightweight. And so specification required involving expert review is too heavyweight for them. And I'm wondering if we want to disentangle the two. I don't really know if this is the same issue, but
I'd like to speak to that. Yeah, this is something that was actually sort of in the it was in the charter, and I think we just came up with a really poor name for it. The idea of if you're talking about the idea of a first come first serve, that where they have to include a specification, but there's no technical review whatsoever.
Right.
It would be helpful to have a quick name for that. And I think we came up with something like first come first serve with URL, something that resolves. But if people would be in favor of that with a better name, then
you know what? Jeff wanted it. Maybe I'll go back and ask him.
sounds great. We could throw that. Yeah.
Why don't you put me on the hook for following up on that one?
Thank you.
Okay. And that might be an email to Karsten for the rest of it. The second part, and I'm losing the ability to speak. There's a sort of two-tiered registry concept. It's easy enough to split registries into different procedure sections if you're assigning a numeric value. But if you have strings and you want some of them to be harder to register than others without actually adding some kind of prefix to the easy to register strings, and if the permanent versus provisional concept doesn't make sense for that registry, then you need to either create two separate registries with names that indicate that one of them is IETF approved and one's less formal, or if you want to roll them up into a single registry, you need to insert an actual column, I think called something like regauth was suggested, make it prominent and use it to indicate whether it's, to use the terms in play, whether it's an IETF registration or a simple registration. It's the same principle you see in registries that allow provisional and permanent registration. For our version, at the top of the registry, we'd have a registration procedure table that says in simple equals first come first served, IETF equals IETF review or standards action with expert review or whatever IETF stream dependent procedure you want to apply there. And we don't have a preference when it comes to terms like IETF or simple. So the issues I see with the version in John's document are really just that the specific registration procedures assigned to the two tiers. In that document, the IETF side is standards track or experimental RFC with informational discouraged. And the simple side is also essentially first come, first served, is my understanding. So I'm wondering if standards track or experimental is appropriate for this case. Why don't we also create it as a standalone procedure? And also, what if someone wants to use this model, but they want a more or less restrictive policy for the IETF registrations? I think our section is written makes it easier for them to do this, but I also wonder whether it offers too much choice or if it's too complicated. Something that's it.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I'm not sure in the last analysis whether what you proposed here and what I was writing are enough differently worth worrying about. The particular problem which my draft tried to address, and which is in 5321 bis as a exception procedure, is the case where what was mentioned earlier is important. And the piece of what was mentioned earlier is sometimes it's important to have authoritative registrations with a lot of documentation and community review and what have you, or even expert review and what have you. And in other cases, what's important is just to get something registered. And if somebody's going to take the position that the name is theirs, but they don't want to go through all the IETF hoo-ha, then it's still in the community's interest to reserve the name. So other than that general principle and the ability to write into a specification that kind of registered choice, which probably ought to be in this document somewhere, there's probably no difference between that and what's written here other than very fine details, which one can either debate or just let go. So for example, should this allow experimental or not? I don't care. There's argument for experimental. And again, when this was first drafted, the reason for pushing the IETF side was as much getting input from the community as it was getting a seal of approval. But again, not certain it makes a lot of difference in what you write in text.
Are there any other comments on this? So John, it sounds like you're pretty much okay with us basing any further discussion on what's written here now. Is that true?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's take that as the decision.
I think some of these details may need further discussion, but I'm fine with that.
Okay, so we'll start with this as the decision, and if you can send any of the further discussion that you have to the list, we can take it from there.
Good, and you can drop the last item on the agenda.
AOB struck.
Okay, in that case, I think we're good, and I'll follow up with Karsten on the first one. Okay. Oh, right, I have the clicker. That's what's happening. So this BIS section summary, I wasn't actually sure whether we had that on the agenda or not. I don't know that we really need to cover it here. These are just recommendations from us as to how to make your section clearer to us when you're obsoleting an RFC. Just pointing out some points people might not be aware of. A later document may come along and add new references to the original document after the fact, and we need to have those accounted for, suggesting organizational things involving subsections. I think I will skip this and move forward, or...
Anybody have a burning desire to discuss this? Or if not, we'll move forward. Okay, sounds like we're good moving forward.
Yeah, and I was not aware of that footer as I was making this slide. So these, the first couple, we have notes in the document, just sort of asking, do we need to drop this? The document already has a sort of basic description of deprecated and obsolete. I think the consensus was that we don't need to define them further, at least not here. Just kind of checking on that. There was a discussion of the reserve text, whether we need to specify certain kinds of reservations beyond it. I mean, private use is already defined in the document. Experimental use is defined in the document. Do we need to add something like reserved for future extension? Do we need to memorialize that in the document? It seemed there was kind of a split, and it seemed like there's maybe not a real strong push for anything like that. We had a status section in our list of items you might want to include in your registry. And we had been asking, should we present a list of possible status entries? And I think that the decision is that what we've since put in would be fine, which is that it may be useful to include such a field. There's no single agreed upon set of registries. It can be used to record certain items we mentioned earlier, like provisional and permanent, deprecated, obsoleted. I did see someone mention, I think that it might be useful to have a discussion of this, I don't know, the history of this field or how it's not working, which we're not, really qualified or prepared to do, I think.
This is Barry Lee, but it might be useful to have just something that briefly says these are the sorts of things that are commonly put in this field, just to give people a sense of it. But I wouldn't get wrapped around an axle about it. And the only reason that I'm saying that is that we've had a few times when an AD has put a discuss on the document saying you need to define these terms, what these mean. And the answer from the authors is almost always, well, they're plain English words. Everybody knows what they mean. So having that in here would probably be just a useful, helpful thing, maybe a paragraph. So.
Paul Hoffman, fully disagreeing with Barry, simply because of what you just exactly said. Everyone thinks they know what they mean. If we put anything in here with even pointing at registries that have already said it, they've said it wrong to some large group of people and such. I think much, much better would be to leave it alone for now and acknowledge that people do things differently and they use words differently.
So if we add a sentence saying something like, people may use the word current differently and in different contexts.
I don't know, what I'm hearing Paul say is that it's better not to say anything than to try to do that. And I guess I'm fine with that.
Okay. Is it, what about continuing to say what we're saying now? It may be useful to have a status field. Okay. Okay. What about pointing? We're currently also pointing to a few examples. Should we? Okay. Yeah, they're diverse, I think. Yes, we currently list a few examples and tried to get different. But if somebody wants to send specific examples.
No, I like the idea of having a couple of examples that disagree with each other. Mm-hmm. that gives the message perfectly.
Okay, could you send us if you have some in mind, because we're using.
TLS and DNSSEC.
Okay.
It's always TLS.
It's always DNS.
It's
Always DNS.
TLS.
It's coming to me. It's not MM's fault.
Okay, moving forward. And these are just other items. Just in the last at the last meeting, there was, I think, some confusion about what our module section was for, which is it's just sort of how to describe module related actions. You know, if you're updating an existing module, if you're creating a whole new type of module, and we've separated Yang into its own little subsection that points to 8407 bis, which is where all the action is. And Med said this looks okay. There's originally we were suggesting that ADs should approve all notes at the top of the registries unless we're pointing to an IANA resource, like here's how to grab all the modules, or if we were describing, you know, registration procedures, or rather saying here's how to go register this. And there was some pushback though, pointing out that the ADs might want to know if an expert wants to send people to, say, an external resource like GitHub, as opposed to an IETF list or you know, IANA's request tracker. So this is kind of not a sub question really. Is there any way in which this document should address externally managed registries? Do we care about this?
Elliot's perspective, that'd be a big fat no. You got enough to be getting on with. And
yeah,
external registries can have their own policies and their own documents. This one's about your registry.
Well, it's our yeah, I explained that badly. It's registries we maintain, but say all the request approvals and discussions are handled outside of an IETF mailing list and outside of the IANA ticketing system. Maybe they're off on GitHub, for instance.
No, sorry.
Yeah, I'm also happy with that.
Okay.
That's fine.
You guys define the procedure, right?
Mhm.
Here's you have a ticket system. It goes through the ticket system, gets assigned to designated expert. If those guys want to use whatever they want to use, if there's like a mailing list or whatever, if they want to do their own, if your designated experts want to do their own internal process, that's their business, as long as they come back to you with an answer.
That works.
Yeah, what Elliot said. I mean, if they want, they could put a note in there that says, this is discussed over here, but
Yeah.
yeah, you got enough, like you said,
Yeah.
you got enough to do.
Okay, yeah, that's what's currently happening. So maybe just the one more slide. So just to note a few things we need to add still, aside from what's been discussed here today. We need to go through various examples we have, for examples of, you know, first come, first serve, see these RFCs, because we want to point to not necessarily more recent RFCs, but more recent IANA consideration sections that do things we want people to, you know, see done. We need to probably, I think, split more sections into subsections, just for, I think they're easier to read, it's easier to find things. Just the one issue we really had with the only issue we really had with 8126 is just that it's long, this will be longer, but it can be hard to find specific points. And we found this tiny little item, which is that people don't seem to be aware often that they need to register something in the URN sub namespaces registry, like under instead of URN IETF params. They're putting things directly under URN IETF, and off the top of my head, I can think of like 5 times it's come up. So I think that goes somewhere in our miscellaneous. And we know people want boilerplate. We think this probably goes to the help page because this can, we can think of improvements over time and maybe, XML related requests we might have. So I think that's it.
Can you back up to the previous page? I just had a clarifying question. So for the second point, you're saying that is that where things stand? That this is the text at the top of registry must be approved by the AD?
So at this point, if there's a note, if we're pointing out, hey, there's a mailing list, and you need to contact us if you haven't heard anything, we're adding those notes.
Okay.
Or hey, find this on our website here. But if it's something more like something about the registry, or
Has the ISG requested that?
No, it's just been our practice is to just, and we're not asking we're just asking the ADs.
Okay.
I guess it occurs to me now that there are independent stream sub-registries and IRTF sub-registries. So
Well, A, and B, I think this might be one where it's better to ask forgiveness than permission. But maybe the ADs might feel differently. I don't know. It seems like it's just added work for the ADs, and
Yeah.
you guys seem to do a good enough job on it. So unless there's a problem, right?
Okay.
Why bother asking for approval? It creates another queue.
okay, we're okay with taking that out.
I mean,
And
does anybody else disagree with me?
okay.
Okay.
I hit a registry in the last month that clearly had wording at the top that no AD would have approved. That I'm assuming that the expert reviewers who had 4 paragraphs added 3 more that were scary and such like that. I've dealt with it, but
is it just one case?
yes. So but I mean, that again, that was not, I wasn't looking for it. I was looking at the registry and going, what the hell is the words at the top? And I was like, So I think this is reasonable.
Okay, I would say there are absolutely cases where we've just posted expert notes without getting AD approval.
I'm assuming that's what happened
in the past.
Yeah.
I think it's just a bug.
To the mic.
Yeah.
So I would just treat that as a bug rather than creating a whole process flow around it. That's let's keep it as unless it becomes a real general problem, right? Let's not require the IANA to have to do more work and the ADs to have to do more work.
Okay, and we'll certainly err on the side of caution as far as that goes.
I'm not.
Alexa.
So just a quick question, follow up on this. Did you get much pushback from ADs about approving them, saying that it's too much work, or?
No, but it doesn't come up very often.
Okay, so yeah, I think that's reasonable as it is then.
I'll be the rough.
Okay, for the notes, Elliot declared himself to be in the rough.
So I think that's it.
I think this is our last slide.
That was, we went back one.
Yeah.
So that's
Any other questions to the working group? Okay. The one item that we had after this was AOB to take John Clenson's document, but John agreed during the processing of the earlier part of it that we would go forward based on the language that's in this draft rather than in his draft. So there's going to be some additional discussion of that language on the list as a follow-up, but we're not going on to that AOB item because it's no longer salient. That said, is there anything else that people need to bring to the working group at this time? All right. Thanks everybody for your time today. And we appreciate all of the collegial interaction and look forward to seeing you on the list. We're adjourned.
Be in Iraq. Oh, great. That'll get some attention when the minutes get posted and I go through the U.S. Customs. All right.